collections or not? Well, only time will tell. Well, the Ford Foundation is keen on supporting social programs in Kenya in a bid to help end poverty and boost equality. Well, I had an exclusive interview with Darren Walker, the president of the Ford Foundation, an international social justice philanthropy with a $13 billion endowment and $600 million in annual grant making. Well, here is that interview. As we are hosting Ford Foundation President Darren Walker, who is in the country, and he is here to talk more about issues of equality, justice, and philanthropy. He now joins me here on the set from Serena to just delve deeper into these issues. Thank you, Darren, for joining us. Well, Darren, you are talking to hundreds of university students at the University of Nairobi, and your focus really was on matters to do with inequality using conventional and unconventional tools. And for this purpose, let's just begin by you sharing with us what brings you to Kenya.
The Ford Foundation has been successful to the extent that the Kenyan people have been successful. We are here in support of the aspirations and ambitions of the Kenyan people. As I reflect on our 6 decades here, I think about the 3 I's, the investing in ideas that we have done, in institutions, and our investments in individuals. We have supported the training, the scholarships, fellowships for thousands of people in Kenya and Eastern Africa. Today, many of those people occupy positions of influence in government, in civil society, and the private sector. We've also supported the creation and building of institutions that today are the undergirding of the civil society infrastructure in this community. And finally, we have supported ideas. We have supported ideas like microfinance, which we helped to introduce to this region, which today makes it possible for literally thousands of families to save and to have enterprises. So I believe that the Ford Foundation, like the Kenyan people, has been relatively successful, but we can do better.
Right.
I think we continue to support the country as we have in years past. And so we actually don't like to come like the donor and sprinkle dollars around. Right. We find that patronizing because the power and the assets in this country are really the people. And we are leveraging this country's greatest assets, its people. Mm-hmm. And certainly yesterday, when I was at the great Taifa Hall, and reminded of this magical hall, this destination for people working on the front lines of change around the world, I thought about how we could help to ensure that its continued reconstruction and modernization occurred. And yesterday I did announce that we would be providing $400,000 towards the improvements and upgrades that are needed at Taifa Hall to continue to maintain its status as the most important place.
One of the biggest aspects that the Ford Foundation has been very vocal on is on how to impact the society, especially working families, and how do we use private equity for social good. We just want you to share with us your thoughts on this.
Well, our investment in this region ranges from $12 to $15 to $20 million a year. It's focused very much on building and strengthening civil society and empowering young people and women and ensuring that we have the infrastructure here that allows for Kenyans to lead and for Kenyans to tell their stories and to develop narratives that reflect the authentic experience of people in this country.
And still on this, how can working families impact private equity for social good in Africa?
Well, I think the first thing we have to understand about dignity, the idea of human dignity, is that work is needed. And our job is to help the government, the private sector, civil society, our educational institutions ensure that young people are prepared for work. And then to help the economy to grow so that jobs are created and that there is more opportunity for employment. Well, I believe that philanthropy has a role to play in doing good in society. And philanthropists, those of us who are privileged, who have more wealth and assets than our average countryman or woman, have an obligation. And that obligation is not just to charity or to be generous. It's to seek justice and dignity for people. And there's a big difference. Charity is about the donor in some ways.
Sure.
Charity makes us feel good, but justice makes us uncomfortable because justice requires us to look at the systems and structures in society which produce advantage for some and produces disadvantage for others. And I believe that the role of philanthropy is to reduce, to deconstruct those systems and structures that get in the way, that are barriers to mobility, to opportunity for people. So philanthropy should be a banker for ideas and aspirations, hopes and dreams. Our job is to help those hopes and dreams be realized.
Well, Kenya's youthful population accounts for about 40% when it comes to people who are unemployed. And how can the Ford Foundation work towards ensuring that we reverse this and have more young people being included in the society through inclusive programs when it comes to giving them opportunities to take part in economic development?
We have to have the models for that. They believe in themselves. We have to believe in them. And our job at the Ford Foundation is about hope. We're in the business of hope. And so we want Kenya's young people to be hopeful for their future. So we want to support and lift up those models of education, of opportunities for jobs, of partnerships, so that people can see that it is indeed possible. Well, I'm energized by the youth of Kenya. Never have I met smarter, more ambitious, more committed and determined young people than in this country. And so I'm inspired by their aspirations to contribute to bettering their country. But in order for their aspirations to be fulfilled, institutions, government, the private sector must respond to create opportunities. And those opportunities can be created by better education, through more technology, through public-private partnerships between employers and government and philanthropy. And so without public-private partnerships and policies that create opportunities for them, Kenya's youth are not going to realize their dreams. And that would be a real shame.
As an experienced person who has dealt with the youth from across the globe, how do we instill hope in them in economies or countries that the political system is sort of failing? How do we advise these young people so that they can still be part of progressive growth of economies?
Well, I think philanthropy has a great responsibility to innovate, to support innovation. Throughout the history of modern philanthropy, certainly the 20th century, philanthropy was behind some of the greatest social achievements, from the Green Revolution and feeding millions of people, to vaccines, to the creation of mechanisms for financing the poor. So innovation, whether it's through technology or other means, is something that philanthropy can invest in and must invest in as we seek to continue to unlock solutions for today and tomorrow's challenges.
A piece published in Foreign Affairs, an article that you did actually, Walker, you very critical of global realignment with politics of nationalism and populism clashing with the old order. So how well are philanthropies like the Ford Foundation adjusting to this in countries like Kenya, where poverty and political exclusion continue to limit the gains that are being realized in other parts of the world?
My foreign affairs article was about how we in philanthropy and we international donors should comport ourselves in the global south. We need to move away from top-down technocratic interventions, that we need to be more humble. We need to be better listeners. We need to empower and have trust in those who are most proximate to the challenges we are seeking to solve. And we have to believe in the people on the ground, in the communities, representing the citizens, the countries where we hope to have an impact. So my foreign affairs article was really about a message to donors, how we have to change. And certainly for American and European donors, the world is a much more multipolar world. The world is not one any longer where just because you are American or European, you should expect deference from countries in the global south. And so I hope that it has some influence in changing the behaviors, the approaches of donors. Well, we need those philanthropists to be networked. It's one of the reasons the Ford Foundation supports the Africa Philanthropy Network, because we need to build a community of donors who share values, who share aspirations, who understand that their work should be about altruism and selflessness and an effort to truly transform society. And I believe that African philanthropy is going to grow because wealth on this continent is continuing to grow. The challenge for the continent will be how equally is that wealth distributed? How much shared prosperity will this continent see? That will determine the future of happiness of its people and the strength of its democracies.
Interesting. And Darren, as we come to the tail end of this conversation, I just want to pick your thoughts on what is the future of Africa now that there are so many narratives out there saying Africa rising, others saying corruption has been increasing, there's political turmoil. What are your honest assessments of Africa's growth?
I am very bullish on Africa, and I think the potential of this continent, and particularly Kenya, is far from being realized. So I'm hopeful about this country and this continent. I'm a believer in the people, their hopes and their dreams. And so as I return to America, I leave energized and inspired and hopeful by all that I have seen in this great country. Well, the ultimate objective is for Kenya to be a prosperous, successful society. And it won't be if its young people feel marginalized and left out. And so the long-term effect that we're all working towards is to put the ingredients in place so that young people can get on the mobility escalator and ride that escalator as far as their ambition, their education, and their determination takes them.
Well, many thanks for joining us, Darren Walker, the Ford Foundation President. Such an honor to host you on the program. Well, you've heard it from Darren. He's quite bullish about the growth prospects for Africa, and he remains optimistic that the economies will continue to perform, and he has called on the country to have more philanthropists who can actually step in and support inclusivity as well as equality if Africa and Kenya is to grow its population as well as grow the levels of development. Well, it has been an exclusive interview with Ford Foundation President, and many thanks.